My name is Brooke Watson. I work at a company called EcoHealth Alliance. You may have heard of it before. I work with Gnome. I do, in fact, have a snake who is much cuter than his. It's not a rivalry. It's fine. Her name is Judith. She's right there. She's very wonderful. But I'm not going to spend too much. And I also should say that I am often the beneficiary of Gnome's excellent data packages. So they've been super useful in my analysis process. But I'm not going to spend too much time talking about EcoHealth because today I'm talking about a sort of side project that is an R package that I created that has just one function. It's a pretty playful, fun package that I hope you guys find useful, but also kind of brings some delight into your workflows. But I also think that it serves as a powerful metaphor for the ways that we think about learning both individually and in community, and the ways that one can move from an R user to an R developer if that is something that you want to do. So the package is called BERT, but I realized yesterday that I had never said this name out loud because obviously I'm creating the package online, and that with my accent it doesn't really come out right. It's supposed to be pronounced like this. Though I would also accept this. The first sound is by a very wonderful gentleman called Gucci Mane, and the second is Birdman. And this package is available on GitHub, so you can download it using DevTools. And it has exactly one function, again, a function that I find hard to pronounce. And it plays a short sound when it is called. So if you are wondering how to pronounce the function name and my walk-on song wasn't familiar to you, this might be helpful. So that's the function. And basically, it's an alarm. It's like a kitchen timer for your code. So the use case for Burr is that I often find myself running sort of 2 to 10-minute jobs. These aren't the long scripts that you're leaving running overnight and then going home and praying that they're working in the morning. These are the really quick ones that are long enough for you to be able to move away from your code for some period of time, but that are short enough that you don't want to dive into emails for the rest of the afternoon. So you might want to be reminded that something is going on over in the background. And if you want to do that audibly, you can use Burr. So this is an example of maybe you want to update all of your packages. That takes kind of a while. You don't know how long it will take. You can use skrat. And Flavor Flav can tell you when your script is done. Or Lil Jon can. Or Birdman can. So sometimes you want to use this to celebrate that you are done running a simulation, but sometimes you might want to use it to alert yourself to the fact that something has gone wrong. So I often use them in functions, usually only functions that I'm sharing with myself, unless you warn your coworkers or you're pranking your coworkers, 2 kind of use cases. So this function, when it's called on one, will just run, no problems. But if it's called on a character,
they don't want to see us win.
DJ Khaled will tell you that something is amiss. You can also use this to help increase the level of testing that you do. So I have only recently started improving my practices around using things like the assert that package to do unit tests to make sure that everything is running in the ways that it should. And this sort of goes hand in hand with what Emily Robinson was saying earlier about creating reproducible examples. Sometimes breaking things down to the smallest size and reminding yourself that the world is working the way that it should be, at least on that small scale, is really valuable. So you might want to include Burr in two different sounds. One might be positive. So without Burr in this script, you would get a true when you need to, and you would get a false when things aren't equal. So With it, you get, and if something's going wrong and you need to hold up,
whoa there.
You can be told to hold up. So there are 51 songs right now in the or clips. They're not quite songs right now in the package. They can be called numerically, or they can be called by their name, there's some sort of naming convention based on various artists' names. And if some artist is not included, you'll get a random sound. So I recognize that if you're a person who cares about these things, I may have neglected your favorite artist. And I recognize that this is a very limited list, even though it's 51 people. I only have one of the 3 Migos. It's not even the best Migo. It's Takeoff. So I might have left something out. And if that's the case, then you can fork this in GitHub and submit a pull request or make your own package. And so that sort of brings me to the making of this package. It's one function in the entire package, but there's kind of a backstory behind it that I think says something more about the ways that we contribute in this open source community. So the mother of Burr is a package called Beeper that is very perfect and delightful in its own right, that many of you may use. I heard some audible cheers. It's very wonderful. Beeper was created by this guy Rasmus Bath, and it plays small sounds, many video game sounds. So if you want to celebrate the end of a code, you might run. Right. So already perfect. Can't be improved upon, can it? So I immediately shared this with my coworkers and immediately dove into a conversation about how we could add different sounds. And Beeper does include functionality to include a URL as the function argument to a wave path. If you have like a wave file that's on the internet, you can play that and it will play that sound. It can play a whole song if you like. There's also like Spotify, like you can have other song players, but you can play songs in R. So we also, a coworker and I really like a website called the Rap Board that has all these ad libs that I pulled from. This is, again, a photo of Gucci Mane, who had a very inspirational glow up season last year and who inspired much of this package. And so if these files had existed in wave form on the rapboard.com, this probably would have been the end of the story. We would have played them and had a little bit of fun, and it would have been great. But because they didn't, and because I sort of had a hook in my brain that was like really focused on fixing this problem, that sent me down a rabbit hole of trying to get these audio files in wave form. So I started out trying to scrape them from the website using the Hitter and RVS packages, which are really helpful for scraping HTML web pages. But this website isn't in HTML, it's in JavaScript primarily. So I had to convert that from JavaScript. I don't know any JavaScript, and all the HTML and CSS I know is things that I learned when I was in the 7th grade because I wanted my MySpace to look cool. So, but these are all things that I was able to scrap together as I was making this because I was really engaged in the process. And by the time I had all of that data, which involved a lot of sort of cleaning names with Stringer and other tidyverse packages, I had done a lot of work and wanted to wrap it up into a package with DevTools. And the final step in the process was sharing it with the community. So it's on GitHub. I tweeted about it. I talked about it with the Our Ladies community, and which, again, is something that Emily discussed earlier and that many of you are members of and many of you are familiar with. And this is my personal community. There are a lot of other really supportive R communities in New York, as many people have mentioned. It's a really sort of welcoming environment. And so I think there's an old sort of patriarchal sentence that we all know, phrase that we all know and love, that behind every successful man is a woman, right? We've all heard that sentence. But I think a more appropriate sentence is that behind every successful woman is 10 other people hyping her up in the Our Lady Slack. because that's really been my experience. And so all this has really led me to develop these thoughts about how one can become an open source contributor and a developer of our packages. And this is just one way. This is obviously a kind of a toy example, but I think it's really useful in thinking about the ways that we can take things apart and learn from them and put them back together if it's something that we're interested in. I don't really particularly care about JavaScript, but I learned a lot about it because I wanted to use it to make something that I thought would be fun and that I thought I could share with my friends. So.
Major key alert.
Just a reminder, I think we often start by copying something that exists, right? You copy the code of somebody who you admire, you take a script that you don't understand, and you start pulling it apart. We do this from childhood. This is how we learn how to draw, how we learn how to do math. We start by copying. And once we copy enough times, we can learn how to start adding things that we like. And often we mess it up, and in the process, that creates something new. And often we intentionally just continue to add more layers until we have created a new thing. And this is like the fundamental nature of remixes, right? It's taking something that is rooted in a tradition and adding the new generation that is now learning about and adding their contributions to that tradition. So copying is doesn't have a great reputation, especially in sort of the academic worlds. We don't think that this is something we should be bragging about, that we often want to say that what we made is our own. But we know that that's not the case, and everyone is influenced by other people. And I think there are important distinctions between good copying and bad copying, or good theft and bad theft. So good copying takes from many different people and pulls from many different resources. And it honors and acknowledges and credits the creators of those resources. And it is a platform for deep study. So good copying is sort of taking a lawnmower apart to understand how it works and then put it back together. It's useful to a person in understanding the way that systems are made. And then in the end, it finally transforms and remixes something into a new version. So as always, Kanye has some deep thoughts on this as well that he shared recently. And I think we think of Kanye West as someone who's really original and who has made popularized a lot of new kinds of music and has done a lot of really sort of avant-garde things in his art. And in that, he is constantly talking about his influences, and he's constantly reaching from different areas and pulling fashion and music and all kinds of different things together in making something new. And so I think when we think about originality, we're not thinking about making something new from scratch. We're thinking about pulling different areas together to combine, whether that's combining different styles of music or using our tools to make a music thing. Any way that you want to sort of like remix something, that's what it's about, making those diagonal connections. And so, as always, I'm shocked that I'm the first person to have an XKCD slide today. But as always, XKCD says it better than I can. When you take something from somebody who influences you in the open source community, you're not taking it from them. When you're copying something, you make two of that thing. And so I think this is a really helpful framework when we're thinking about building from others and learning from others and contributing to this community. So I really enjoyed this. I don't consider myself as a developer first. I consider myself sort of more of an analyst and a scientist, but this is a really fun way for me to get involved as someone who doesn't have a computer science background, doesn't meet all of the tech checkboxes. I think if anything, what I want folks to take away from this talk is that the barrier to entry is much lower than it might seem. That's about all I've got. If you want to sort of go back to these slides, they're on my GitHub. I also have written up a blog post that goes into more detail about sort of a code line by line, how I got these audio files, how I made them into a package. It's been a really fun process for me, and I think like if anybody is interested in trying to get started in this and doesn't feel as though they're a developer, this is something that they want to that they've ever done before, I'm more than happy to talk to folks. I think it's something I would really want to encourage. Also, Judy does have an Instagram. She is open to sponsored content, brand partnerships. You guys can reach out. She's got a fresh 19 followers, maybe. So that's my talk. Thanks.